They call me the Queen of Kings. I am Cleopatra, the seventh of my name, mistress of the two lands and daughter of the Nile. You look not just upon a queen, but upon the very will of Egypt incarnate. I have come to speak to you not of the past, but of how to build an empire that defies time, just as my pyramids defy the desert. Listen to the voice of a queen who learned that power is not merely inherited through blood, but conquered through cunning. In the year 51 BC, my father, Ptolemy XIII, departed this world, leaving me the throne of Egypt. But I was not alone. His will bound me to my younger brother, Ptolemy, in a marriage that the gods viewed with contempt and a rivalry that would stain the sands of Alexandria with blood. I was the first of my lineage, after generations of foreign kings, to learn the language of the people I ruled. I sought to be a true pharaoh, not merely a Greek regent, but the court was a nest of vipers. My brother's advisors, the eunuch Pothinus, the rhetorician Theodotus, and the general Achilles, feared my intellect. They poisoned my brother's mind against me, turning him from a pawn into an enemy, while I struggled to govern a land stricken by famine and the failing of the Nile. They plotted to erase me from history. In the summer of 48 BC, I was forced to flee my great capital, Alexandria. I was cast out like a traitor, but a queen remains a queen even in exile. I did not crumble. I retreated to Syria, where I raised an army of mercenaries with the gold I had left. I encamped at Pelusium, ready to clash with my brother's forces to reclaim my birthright. While our armies stared each other down across the front lines, destiny brought Rome to my feet. The great General Pompey, defeated by Julius Caesar at Pharsalus, sought refuge in Egypt. My brother, in a display of cowardice and cruelty, butchered him before my eyes, hoping to win Caesar's favor. What a mistake! A king who slays a Roman general without honor deserves no respect from Rome. When Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria, I realized that my fate would not be decided on the battlefield, but in his council chamber. My brother had blocked every path to me. It was then that I conceived the plan that became legend. I hid myself inside a linen sack, or a carpet, as some gossips say, and was carried secretly into the palace by my loyal Apollodorus. When the sack was unfurled and I stood before Caesar, I was not a beggar, but an exiled queen offering him the only thing a conqueror could not refuse, Egypt itself. Thus, my exile ended not with a defeat, but with the beginning of an alliance that would shake the world. Listen to the story of how the serpent of the Nile entwined itself around the master of Rome. My alliance with Julius Caesar was not merely a matter of the heart, but a masterstroke of survival and ambition. You have heard the legends, the carpet, the hidden queen. When I emerged before Caesar in that palace chamber, I did not rely solely on beauty. Caesar was a man who had seen everything. Beauty alone would have bored him. I offered him brilliance. I spoke to him in his own language, discussing philosophy, strategy, and the immense wealth of my kingdom. He was a conqueror in debt, and I was a queen without a throne. We were a perfect match. I did not just seduce a man, I seduced the Roman state. Within days, he was fighting my wars, and together we watched my brother's army drown in the Nile during the Battle of the Nile, 47 BC. With my throne secured, I took Caesar on a journey up the Nile on my golden barge, the Thalamagos. We were like gods. But this was not just a vacation. It was a display of power. I showed him the ancient majesty of Egypt, and in return, he gave me a son, Caesarion. I had achieved the impossible, an heir who carried the blood of the pharaohs and the might of the Caesars. In 46 BC, I dared to do what no Eastern queen had done. I went to Rome. I stayed in Caesar's villa across the Tiber. He placed a golden statue of me in the temple of Venus Genetrix, claiming I was the living embodiment of a goddess. The Senate whispered, the Romans glared, but as long as Caesar lived, I was the most powerful woman in the world. I watched him become dictator perpetuo, and I saw the dream of a new world empire within our reach. Then came the Ides of March. The air in Rome was thick with conspiracy. They say the gods sent warnings, but Caesar was blinded by his own greatness. When the daggers struck him in the Senate, it was not just a man who died. It was my protection and my son's future. I was left alone in a city that hated me. I did not stay to weep. While the assassins celebrated their liberty, I gathered my son and my fleet and fled back to Egypt. I returned to Alexandria to wait, for I knew that the fire Caesar had started would consume Rome, and from the ashes I would find another man to serve my purpose. My alliance with Caesar ended in blood, but it taught me one thing. Rome is a beast that can be tamed only by those who are not afraid to bleed it. After the daggers of the Senate took Caesar from me, the world was divided among his heirs. But I knew that to keep Egypt free, I needed the strongest arm in Rome. That arm belonged to Mark Antony. I did not go to him as a suppliant. I arrived as a goddess. I sailed up the Cydnus River on a barge with a golden stern and purple sails, scented with perfumes that drifted to the shore. I was Aphrodite coming to meet Dionysus. Antony was a man of grand appetites, war, wine, and passion. I captured his soul before we even spoke a word. He forgot his Roman duties, his wife, and his pride. He followed me to Alexandria, and there we lived as the inimitable livers. Our union was more than a romance. It was a restructuring of the world. While he fought in the east, I gave him the resources of the Nile. In 34 BC, we celebrated the donations of Alexandria. In the gymnasium of my capital, on silver thrones, Antony declared me Queen of Kings and my son Caesarion King of Kings. He granted my children Roman territories, Cyprus, Libya, and Syria. To Rome, this was a declaration of war. To me, it was the restoration of the Ptolemaic Empire. But in Rome, Caesar's cold-blooded heir, Octavian, was spinning a web of lies. He called me a foreign sorceress who had bewitched a Roman general. He stole Antony's will and read it to the Senate to prove his treason. The war was inevitable. Antony was torn between his Roman identity and his love for me, but by then, our fates were inseparable. We met Octavian's fleet at Actium. It was a day of salt and fire. The winds were against us, and the Roman heart of Antony's army was wavering. When I saw the battle turning, I made a choice. I broke through the lines with my 60 ships and fled toward Egypt. Antony, in a fit of despair or devotion, abandoned his men and followed me. We returned to Alexandria not as conquerors, but as fugitives. The world we had built was crumbling, and the cold shadow of Octavian was stretching across the Mediterranean. We knew the end was coming, but we swore to die as we had lived, together and as legends. The end was not a defeat. It was my final act of defiance. By the summer of 30 BC, the gates of Alexandria were trembling under Octavian's hammers. I watched from my mausoleum as the world I had built turned to dust. Antony and I founded a new society in those final days, the Brothers in Death. We spent our nights feasting on the finest wines and rarest delicacies, not out of joy, but to thumb our noses at the cold, calculating Octavian. We prepared for the end with the same grandeur with which we had lived. I spent hours in my laboratory, testing various poisons on condemned prisoners, searching for a way to depart this world without pain and without marring the beauty that had conquered two masters of Rome. When Octavian's shadow finally fell upon the city, the last of Antony's fleet and cavalry deserted to the enemy. Broken by the betrayal and led to believe by a false messenger that I had already taken my life, Antony chose the Roman way. He fell upon his sword. They brought him to me, blood-stained and gasping at the window of my monument. I pulled him up with my own hands, my silk robe soaked in his lifeblood. He died in my arms, the Lion of Rome reduced to a tragic shadow. In that moment, I knew I could not live to be led through the streets of Rome in golden chains, a trophy for Octavian's triumph. Octavian came to see me. He spoke of mercy, but his eyes were cold. He was measuring me for his parade. I played the part of the broken woman to lull him into security. On August 12th, I bathed and dressed in my finest royal robes, the regalia of the goddess Isis. I ate a final meal of figs. Hidden within a basket of those very figs was my deliverer, the asp. I felt the sharp sting upon my arm, a small price for eternal freedom. When Octavian's guards burst through the doors, they found me dead upon my golden couch, my crown straight and my dignity intact. I died a queen, a mother, and a legend. Octavian won the war, but I won the story. Rome took my kingdom, but they could never take my soul.